in society, really, where the share of digital health will continue to take share from the share of in-person care. And that will continue in an ongoing way for years and years and years. What an opportunity to reinvent what it means to be a clinician.
Hello and welcome to the Healthtech Marketing Podcast, brought to you by Health Launchpad and HIMSS. I'm Adam Chirinos. I'm Health Launchpad founder and CEO and your host for today. I want to give a big thank you to my partner HIMSS and for all the support in putting this podcast together. And also a big thank you to you for joining us. You know, what we try to do here is to bring you smart people, smart health tech people who know a lot about how to build a health tech business, to share their insights. And got a really interesting guest today. I'm delighted to introduce you to a guy by the name of Guy Friedman. Guy is the CEO and founder of SteadyMD, and he's a serial health tech entrepreneur and just a super savvy marketer and sales guy. So Guy, welcome to the show. First, tell us a bit about yourself and SteadyMD.
Sure. SteadyMD, we're a 6-year-old startup. We've been in this space for a bit now. We actually started out, many of your listeners might know us from our old days where we started out in the virtual primary care space. So for the first 3 or 4 years, we were a direct-to-consumer virtual primary care offering to consumers, really focused on the high-end version of that business. So we charged a monthly subscription fee, and our patients got unlimited access to this great, dedicated, aligned clinician that fit well with their lives. Fast forward to early 2020, we realized we built all this great infrastructure to power our own digital health operation, including the ability to recruit, manage, and maintain a network of clinicians in all 50 states. Kind of like a focus on all the clinical protocols around prescriptions, labs, referrals, not only what the clinicians were doing, but also the back office and technology associated with that. A technology to connect the patient experience to the clinician experience. And then underneath it all was this regulatory infrastructure in all 50 states we had cracked over the years to be able to actually see patients under different modalities. And so in early 2020, we kind of experimented with allowing other digital health companies to use our clinicians on their platforms. And then we quickly realized that was going to be a huge business and pivoted the whole business to that business model. So now SteadyMD is really the market leader in this idea around powering digital health companies with our on-demand clinician network, which is doctors, nurses, and therapists licensed and able to see patients in all 50 states, and connecting all these digital health experiences into ours via our product and technology. So companies can scale and grow without the massive operational lift of building out an entire clinician workforce.
It's an amazing accomplishment. In building a startup, one of the things that one thinks about is the notion of building a moat. And you've certainly taken on some hard things. I mean, having physicians' licenses in all 50 states and available and set up to be able to do virtual care is pretty hard. What is, virtual care has sort of exploded since 2020. That COVID was horrible. Thankfully, we seem to be on a more even keel with it. I daren't say that we're out of it, certainly not out of it. But maybe one of the positive things that came out of the pandemic was that it sort of unleashed a lot of things that really should have actually been, sort of had broader usage in healthcare, like virtual care. And so, it obviously created an opportunity for you. Can you talk about sort of the dynamics of the space that you're in, and some of the, and how many competitors are there? Is this a very competitive space that you're in?
No, it's not very competitive because of all the years of setup we did to get where we are today. There's not a real way to fast forward that, even with tons of resources. To get your physician group registered, it's a state-by-state effort. To get your doctor's license, it's a state-by-state effort. To look to see if your specific cool mode of telehealth is legal and okay to do is a state-by-state effort. So each of those things is just your setup, and then you have to build out a whole operational team to recruit, manage, and train clinicians on your specific clinical protocol and technology. That's a multi-year effort. If not, if you're doing it right, millions of dollars. But to comment on your earlier point, we actually, when we launched our original business model, it started with this. It was kind of the start of this explosion of offerings within digital health that were unique and different from the past. Meaning, I think the first kind of a wave of digital health was really urgent care telemedicine for primary care by the big companies like Teladoc, Doctor on Demand, MD Live. They were sort of the pioneers in the space where when I get sick, I can connect with a doctor. That was sort of already solved 5-6 years ago and available to most of us. The new offerings, which is backed by tens of billions of dollars in venture capital, private equity, hospitals, you name it, are these focused point solutions on every single condition under the sun. Fertility, migraines, men's health, women's health, everything. Where a lot of the times those products and experiences are better than the in-person PCP visit, let's say, because it's so focused and designed for that one thing. And I think as we were building our business, all those offerings exploded, which created a much bigger market size for digital health and a much greater need for stuff that we do. And then COVID hit, and it was like this natural experiment for all these companies to see if they would actually get adoption in a short amount of time. And some of them didn't. And it's like, okay, well, if you didn't get adoption during COVID, maybe this was flawed from the start. But typically that sort of utilization adoption takes years in digital health before. And so there's like a nice natural experiment where you could rapidly iterate and see if you would get adoption in a case where people were basically forced to look for solutions. So I think that was really great for the digital health industry as a whole. Obviously, none of us should be depending on, the crazy COVID volumes of 2021 right now. But I think it was a good natural experiment for all the companies in the space, including ours.
Yeah, it just the thing I think is so interesting about what your story is the pivot. A lot of pivot's one of those startup things that everybody say, oh, we pivoted. It's like, no, you didn't. You just you just fine-tuned. You pivoted, right? Because you were selling B2C, right? Business to patient.
Yeah. No, we did a pretty big pivot.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's really hard to do. And now it's a B2B play, and your customers are who exactly?
All the digital health companies that you've probably interviewed. Basically, we're infrastructure. So every single interaction, prescription, visit in digital health eventually hits a clinician. And that moment is incredibly expensive and difficult to achieve for all these companies on the ops side and the infrastructure side. Forget attracting a client and having them pay you and then connecting that patient to a clinician. Just the part about, there's a clinician available in Iowa ready to go is like this whole other thing that most of the public doesn't see, but it's an incredible stress and really expensive to achieve. So we service everything from like the direct-to-consumer digital health companies, companies whose end users are hospital systems, payers, pharma. Well, at the end of the day, if you need a clinician to be on the end of that visit, you need us to help you scale and grow. So we're sort of like the AWS analogy, where someone's growing, they're going to need storage or whatever AWS would call it, and we're that for the digital health space. So we have clients all over the map.
Fascinating. So how do you sell and market?
Yeah, I mean, I think the case right now is really demonstrating that that value prop. There's a few different cases when we're marketing to clients. There's we're just getting started, and you have to educate them on, okay, this is what it's fine if you want to go it alone and try and build this yourself. From experience, this is how expensive and costly and timely that will be. And is it really worth it for you to do all that when you could plug into SteadyMD and get access to this group of like really highly trained digital health clinician network in a month? Yep. Do you want to take those 2 or 3 years and build out all the stuff that we had to do? I'm speaking from personal experience, right? And then and it's basically the same for the more mature companies that have provider groups. It's look at your internal costs of maintaining this, and instead of spending that on your own volume, maybe it'd make more financial sense to work with us without a drop in quality or clinical effectiveness or anything of that nature. So it's different, but at the end of the day, it's the same value prop for everyone. Save operational costs and time and focus on what you're good at: your product, your patient experience, your sales, your value prop, and let us worry about like that core infrastructure piece.
It's a very clear value prop, and it's also one that customers are going to self-select for. And I suspect that I'm guessing that your best customers are the ones that try to do it and they're just giving up. So they say, okay, you don't need to sell us on the pain. We got the pain. Yeah,
if I'm in the room with the person who handled this at the company, sometimes it's the founder, sometimes it's an ops person. It's pretty cool because I speak their language, and I talk about this on other podcasts. You can see their shoulders relax when I say we exist, and you can just plug in. It's like a music to their ears, because
you see the moment of truth, right?
Exactly, because they're like, because I think it's still early days, and not every company knows that. Now we're getting more and more popular, I think. And more well known, but in the earlier, like the last year, they were, everyone was stressed out at the company about this piece, and so if we could solve that for them, it was a huge relief. So it's pretty cool.
So how do you get your story out there? People, I think you said that most of your opportunities are inbound. Is that right?
A lot are now. I mean, I think that's not going to last forever. I think given the growth of the market and the lack of players in the space of what we do, there's only going to be a few companies that you can call to manage a process like us. So I think it's a very limited set. So most companies are calling the 1 or 2 companies that you call in this space, maybe 3 if you really feel like it. I think we're continually talking about like branding ourselves in terms of clinical quality. That's in our DNA. It's from the beginning of SteadyMD, we've always been like promoting a better clinician experience and a better patient experience than the typical telehealth or digital health company, and that branding carries through to this business as well, where I've been on a soapbox for years talking about, gaining trust from the patients, the partners, and then something that a lot of companies don't focus on, but we are very focused on, is our clinician experience too. If you talk to many digital health companies, it's not on the first 10 priorities, like how great is this clinician experience? How comfortable are the clinicians? Because it's kind of a cost to them, right? For us, it's our product. And we think that there's a huge brand protectability and being the best place in the world for a clinician to work as well. So so I think that carries through to promoting our brand and product to partners, because they actually deeply care about this stuff and they want to they want someone to like represent that to them. So think about other infrastructure companies where they like, I think like, what's an example from history? Like Dell put the Intel sticker on their computers.
Yeah.
I mean, what is Intel? It's like a chip. Like, why would it meant this thing's out. We want to get to a point where we're like you want to use us because we are the authority on this space, and it's not just about dollars and cents, but like a better patient and clinical experience. And we're going to take care of the patients in a really great way. That's a huge piece of it too.
Yeah, it's Intel Inside is a great analogy. The other thing that sprung into my mind as you were talking about it is it also sounds a bit like the way that Uber has marketed, because it's only relatively recently that Uber actually started doing consumer advertising. I think for most of their life, 15 years or how long Uber's been around.
All drivers.
It's all about the drivers, right? And trying to create a good, positive driver experience. Sure, they've had a lot of controversies, but they still have a lot of drivers. And they're still, if you need to get from A to B, to be honest, I wouldn't even know how to get a taxi these days. I just open the app and I know it's going to work, even at 3:00 in the morning. So how do you, in terms of your marketing and brand building, what's the balance of building it towards customers and prospects versus the talent?
I'd say the customers and prospects are more targeted and like your traditional marketing via LinkedIn, Facebook, the social media, and then conferences, and then outbound sales. On the clinician side, it's just a constant branding and trumpeting of the value prop to them. I would say we don't have an issue with the top of the funnel, especially in primary care. A lot of clinicians want to work in digital health. Like, it's
interesting, really. Why is that?
Well, it's especially within primary care, the clinicians feel burnt out, taken advantage of. The administration of the hospital, wherever they work, is kind of is a very antagonistic relationship there. So a lot of them are trying to figure out ways to augment their life and lifestyle where they don't feel so burnt out. And honestly, it's about respect too. I think a lot of primary care clinicians feel disrespected by the system. And so we try and kind of trying to reinvent that for the online experience. So if we're at this inflection point in society, really, where the share of digital health will continue to take share from the share of in-person care, and that will continue in an ongoing way for years and years and years. What an opportunity to reinvent what it means to be a clinician, and also create a place that clinicians are really proud to work at. And maybe they don't hate the administration and see them as a partner. I mean, what a crazy concept. And then I think if that's the case, I truly believe if they like their job and like who they work for, they'll take care of the patients in a better way. Right. So to me, it's a long-term investment. And as long as we keep doing that and living that, it's not easy. Just like it's not easy for Uber, it's not easy. But if that's the mission and the goal, I think we have a chance at being a generational company where we basically reinvent a crazy huge profession in America. And so that to me is kind of the big audacious goal, and also my personal opportunity to change the world. It's man, what a cool thing to have said after all this is said and done. Is we basically reinvented a category of work. Yeah. And that's the opportunity we have at SteadyMD.
That's so exciting because you're both, changing the life and well-being of the physician, because burnout is it's the number 1, 2, or 3 issue for every healthcare provider CEO. I mean, that's it's such a big issue, and if you provide an alternative for that, and genuinely a place that physicians can feel better about their life, you're going to be incredibly successful. But it's whatever the positive is of a double-edged sword. I mean, it's a two sides. The other side of the coin is, as you say, by doing that, you're creating a great patient experience. And I think what's interesting to me about that is that, I think there's been a little bit of a sort of a retrenchment post the height of the pandemic, where the healthcare systems have seen patients come back in person. And I think the general word is, well, you know what, it's kind of reverting back to a lower number. But I think what you're doing is, over time, is you're going to make it so that patients are actually going to demand more to have a virtual encounter, virtual episode, rather than an in-person one, because it's it's more convenient for them, right? That's obvious. But secondly, if it's actually better, like, I actually prefer to see that doctor who's in Iowa rather than the doctor who lives, the 2 or 3 that are in my neighborhood. Are you set up so that they can have a long-term relationship? Because one of the things that always worries me about,
in the B2B business, we do everything from asynchronous lab orders to urgent care to and everything in between. But you're talking to, one of the original founders of concierge virtual primary care from our original business. So we still do that. But that was all we did the first few years. Now we do everything under the sun. I will say a great clinician experience is mixing a part of your day with your permanent long-term patients that and that you get helps, and then maybe a part of your day you're doing more of the urgent care type stuff, which is also in high demand, and there's a willingness to pay by the patient, and that's still a very very good part of the industry. But if you mix those two, it actually makes for a great working experience for the clinician. So if you're doing some of our virtual primary care clients, and Lemonade Primary Care kind of took over our consumer business. Mm-hmm. So now it's called Lemonade Primary Care Plus. I think it's Primary Care Plus, but and mix that with maybe some of our more urgent care stuff. It's a really interesting and cool day for a clinician. So those, I think, are the clinicians that have the best experience. You're kind of mixing.
So they get, for the clinician's experience, they have patients that they've got a long-term relationship with. It's longitudinal.
Yeah.
And there are others where it's transactional. So they're getting to see lots of different cases.
Right. Yeah. So and these are the most innovative, cool companies in the space. It's this crazy, cool birth control startup. Right. I think things like that. Not every single clinician is able. We don't have exactly the right volume for every clinician to overlap with both. But when they do, it's really a great experience.
Yeah. That's fascinating. So, Guy, I mean, it's been so interesting hearing how you're building the brand from the inside out. It's like you haven't really talked about sort of doing lots of advertising campaigns or big trade shows or all that sort of thing. Sure, that's probably part of what you do, but the success is because intrinsically what you're doing has got a very clear value proposition. Clear value to the talent, the physicians, and you're selling a better patient experience. So I can see how that's
I appreciate you're giving my pitch for me. I appreciate it. No, thank you. We're we have a unique opportunity here to really be ubiquitous in the space. As some fun anecdotes is when other companies pitch themselves as SteadyMD 4X, or when sometimes I'll get a VC telling me that in the financial model, some of their companies have submitted SteadyMD as a line item, which that means I'm in the model. I'm like an embedded little anecdotes like that make us happy. But we're out to be really a generational company and be like the de facto brand in the space. It's almost like a no-brainer, like Stripe or AWS. You just use it because everyone does and it works.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Guy, it's been a fascinating conversation. I really appreciate it. So I'm going to ask you my closing question, which I ask everybody, which is, if you could go back in time and give yourself, it could be any moment in time, and give yourself one piece of advice, what would that be?
Something I've learned over the years is it's actually not operational or not tactical. It's more like for sanity's sake. Find a nice network of friends that you can brainstorm with that understand your life and lifestyle and what you're doing. I think startups can be a lonely place, especially if you're crazy ambitious.
Yeah.
And I'd say 95% or maybe even more of folks I interact with, like they just don't have the mindset of a startup where you're like, I legitimately want to change what it means to be a clinician in America. Yeah. Or I used the example on the last podcast, like I want to fly to Mars. This guy, he looks people in the eye and says and just does it, and so if you don't have people you can chop it up with, it gets really lonely. So I'd say, and I learned this, my first startup, I was a solo founder. I basically didn't talk to anyone for years because I was grinding so hard on it. And I think now I have a great co-founder and team and also friends I can just like chop it up with. I wish I would have done that earlier. I wish I would have cultivated those. I'm shy. So it's like, it's something you have to make an effort to do. But I would say like make your friends with other founders, friends with other founders and just other people that won't be skeptical of what you believe in and will actually brainstorm with you crazy ideas.
Right. I so agree and empathize with that. When I was in a somewhat similar journey to you with my own health tech startup, I've so valued talking to other founders, particularly other founders that might have been like a couple of cycles ahead of me in terms of the journey. Because you could just ask them, listen, this is where I'm at. What do you think is going to happen? And I had one or two people like that. Whereas the converse to that is that, I think there are a lot of, mentoring groups and accelerators that have mentors. And some of the mentors are well-intentioned and very expert in what they do, but they've probably always just been in a big corporation and they're mentoring a startup. And it's like, you don't really get, you got to be really careful what advice you give.
It's like, have you screwed in your desk in your at your office by yourself and put it up and started working? No. So.
Have you basically had like 3 months worth of money left and you're writing, you're writing people's paychecks out of your bank account?
Yeah, no. It's when you have less money than payroll. And then you know what it's like.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, sorry. I'm having like PTSD right now. Well, Guy, thank you. I really appreciate your everything you've said today. It's been really insightful. Yeah. Great. Well, I'm just going to wrap things up here. So before we go, I want to let listeners or viewers, if you're watching the video, you can subscribe to this on any of the podcast channels, Apple, Spotify. We're on about 7 or 8 of them, I think now. And if you're listening to the podcast, you can also view the video. Guys, a lot better looking than I am, and you can watch us through that. Watch us live. And if you're listening to this and you think, hey, I've got an idea for somebody to be on this podcast, it might be you. Let me know. You can email me at adam@healthlaunchpad.com. Thanks for listening.